For this juvenile masculine archetype, a cautionary tale about hubris and making sure that you don't fly too close to the sun is highly relevant. For the mature feminine archetype, the mother, if you like, who, whether or not you have children, when you're in this phase of life where you're spinning all the plates and you're holding a lot of responsibility, you're the vessel, right? I don't think many women need to be cautioned against flying too close to the sun. I think more women need to be cautioned against the risk of never unfolding their wings at all and never really seeing what they're capable of. I'm Madeline Eliza. Join me to explore female power, embodied leadership, sensuality and spirituality as we weave together ancient and modern, the scientific and the mythic, the erotic and the divine. Hello and a very warm welcome to the show. This is our first episode together and I'm so thrilled to have you here. I do not take your attention for granted and really hope to make this a rich, juicy source of information, pulling together lots of different related themes that I've either been immersed in through my professional life, that I have studied, or that I have journeyed through as I have walked through the darkness and the underworld of my own life and really faced those shadows along the way. I think this is such a powerful journey for so many of us. And I'm particularly interested in the different points of convergence that come about from different philosophical and spiritual traditions within science, within mythology. Often there's common themes, and I think if a story or a theme keeps appearing in multiple different places, there's usually something in it. So let's get started. My name is Madeline Eliza. I am a senior leader and I've spent the last 10 years working in close partnership with founders and CEOs in some of Australia's fastest growing companies and building and leading leadership teams within those companies as well. I have been really immersed in learning about organizational psychology, often working in environments of very rapid growth and change where everybody's under extraordinary pressure and we really get tested. So I've been really interested in understanding the importance of organizational culture, in building trust and environments of psychological safety to get the best out of yourself and your team. I've also been really interested in the deep inner work that is required for leaders to perform at their peak. And you don't learn this at business school, you don't learn this in an MBA. It's really about the personal journey through the valleys and the peaks of life and the spiritual insights that you gain along the way. I'm really interested in how we can do the work inside in order to do the work outside. Our world is in a pretty precarious place right now. We're looking at the decades ahead of rapidly escalating change, ecologically, politically, socially. We really need strong leaders and strong leaders who are grounded in themselves, grounded in their bodies, who have a holistic approach to leadership. And that's what I'm really excited to be here fostering and cultivating with this podcast. I'm also very much coming from my position as a female leader. And I think, like many of us, have felt frustrated, firstly, with the glass ceiling of patriarchy, which is kind of the incumbent system that we've had in place for many centuries, where the power belongs to the men and women are second-class citizens. And of course, over the last 120 years especially, we've seen that being largely dismantled by successive waves of feminism. I was born in the 80s, so I've grown up with this messaging that women can do it all. You can do everything that a man can do. And as a card-carrying feminist, when you start living that feminist dream and girl bossing your way to the top, and then you find yourself in complete overdrive and burnout and disconnected from your body and feeling like you have to kind of pretend to be a man in order to hold your place in often a very alpha male dominated corporate environment, the shine starts to come off feminism. And often we can feel like this is amazing and empowering, but there's something missing here. And in the last, I'd say 5 years especially, we've seen this counter movement, which I call the soft femme movement. There's lots of leaders and teachers speaking about embodiment and polarity and encouraging women to drop back down into their soft back body, into their femininity, to renounce hustle culture, to tune in with their cycles and live a much softer life. And I think this has huge wisdom. And for most female leaders who have been in this hustle girl boss mode, it's absolutely where we need to start. But if you are in a senior executive position in a corporate team, it's not always going to serve you to be 100% leaning into your feminine energy. I'm going to bet that you have achieved everything that you've been able to achieve, partly because you've cultivated a strong inner masculine. And the thing is that we each have masculine and feminine energies inside of us, and we actually need both, particularly if we want to perform at our peak as leaders. So I'm interested in a new model of feminine leadership that takes everything we've learned from patriarchy and feminism and this kind of rebound movement into the soft femme operating system. And we fashion something together that fits more comfortably for women who want to lead and want to embody all of their power and really make an impact in this world, because we need strong female leaders right now. And I'm so excited to be here sharing everything that I've learned along my journey, hopefully some insights that may help you along your journey as well. In my opinion, we don't have to be a tough as nails girl boss mixing it with the boys. And we don't have to be a soft femme lying in a field of flowers all day either. We get to be unapologetically all of it. We get to cultivate this balance of masculine and feminine energies within ourselves. And we get to forge a new path of leadership where not only are we honoring the masculine and feminine within ourselves, we're also honoring the balance of these energetics within our team. One of the downsides of feminism, and particularly neoliberal feminism, which is the kind of lean in, girl boss, you can do it all, be super individualistic, you don't even need a man anymore, very corporate capitalist kind of white feminist model. One of the problems with this brand of feminism, and one of the issues that's come out off the back of the Me Too movement, which again was so necessary for so many women, most of us have experienced these kind of injustices and wounding, small or large, at the hands of men in our lives. But off the back of that, I think we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And we talk about toxic masculinity now, but we've almost come to understand that all masculinity is toxic, that patriarchy is toxic, that therefore masculinity is toxic. And we're now in this space where we're sort of asking men to repress their masculinity and to be softer and to be more feminine. And that's not getting the balance right either. So I'm interested in strongly empowered male and female leaders who can cultivate the balance of both of those energetics within their own bodies to stay deeply connected to the body, to the emotions, to the sensory experiences that you have as an individual. And then to be able to go out into the world from a truly grounded and empowered place and reach your fullest potential. That is the aim of this podcast. And I'm going to be diving into a lot of different topics, drawing on, as I said, my leadership experience, drawing on my own spiritual and psychological journey that I've been through over the last 3 decades, and also looking at different spiritual traditions such as Tantra, which is something that I've been studying for the last couple of years. And it's had such a profound impact on the way that I relate to myself as a woman, the way that I relate to my body, and the way that I relate to my power. So I'm going to be weaving all of these themes together. Today, the topic that I really want to speak to is stepping into the void and taking leaps of faith. Death and rebirth, transformative change. This is something as a leader that we all have to face at different times. And I think there's so much potential when we can stand in the fear, in this darkness of transformative change, when we can learn to hold that and to stand with it and to allow these new beginnings to emerge. I'm going to share my experiences with leaps of faith and experiences with different entrepreneurs that I've worked with and what I've learned along my corporate journey. I'm going to share some mythological, archetypal perspectives. One of the things that I believe you'll come to see with this podcast is that stories carry so much power. So we're going to look at a couple of stories that delve into these themes of taking leaps of faith and gather the insights that we can gather from there, like little jewels of learnings that we can take from these different mythological archetypes. I'm also going to be sharing a tantric perspective on taking leaps of faith and stretching ourselves, and the balance of masculine and feminine energies that are required within each of us as individuals in order to carve out space to step into our brightest, fullest potential. Thank you for being with me today. Let's get into it. I'm going to start by introducing myself in a little bit more detail. This is the very first episode of this podcast, and I'm really excited to get to know you all. So I experienced pretty severe anxiety, and I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder at age 12. And this really was a shadow that hung over my adolescence. And I mention it straight off the bat because we're talking about leaps of faith today. And for myself, having spent quite a lot of time in this kind of personal underworld, it's really pushed me to push myself, because throughout that whole journey where I felt like I was broken, like I was other, like there was something wrong with my brain, like I would never be able to really achieve my fullest potential because I was shackled by these psychological experiences that I was having. I was very dysregulated a lot of the time, unable to attend school for periods throughout high school, and it really made an impact on me. And I have spent a lot of time since deliberately putting myself in situations that are very uncomfortable. I'm a performer. I've numerous times taken on roles that I knew would stretch me, that terrified me actually, stepping on stage in front of 500 people to sing a really challenging vocal lead role when I'd never really sung on stage before, for example. I once had an opportunity to sail across the Atlantic Ocean on a sailing yacht with a group of 5 men and me. And again, I had very little sailing experience, but when doors open, I tend to say yes. And a big part of the reason is this wanting to test myself. And I'm sure you've had experiences like that as well. It's really been a guiding light throughout my life and has helped me to peel off the layers of conditioning and discover the fullness and brightness of my potential. So I'm going to be talking about these themes a lot on the podcast here. Anyhow, this experience with anxiety and OCD really marked my early years, my adolescence and my early 20s. And actually, when I finished school, I wanted to be an actress or a poet or a painter. I wasn't interested in doing anything commercial at all. I just wanted to be an artist. I was drawn to this purity of creative expression. And I think creativity is such a rich seam of juicy insight to dive into, how creativity works and why we're drawn to it and what we can gain when we let ourselves play in that space. And I'll save that for a future episode. But for today, just to share a bit about my background, I really started in this very creative space. I went to art school. I've studied various forms of performance. I ended up doing a degree in creative writing. And I didn't have, if you like, the masculine, energetic capacity to hold myself. If we look at masculine and feminine energies from a tantric perspective, the masculine is stillness, is presence, is solidity, and often can hold this container for the feminine. The feminine is everything that is manifest, whereas the masculine is everything that is not manifest. He's pure consciousness. She is pure energy and movement, like life force moving through. And in terms of creativity and taking leaps of faith and stretching ourselves, we need to be able to have this capacity to hold ourselves with a masculine container to allow that feminine energy to flow and to play. And this is the type of polarity that we can cultivate within ourselves. If we don't have a strong masculine container, then our femininity just collapses. That feminine play collapses in on itself. This is what happened to me in my 20s. I wanted to be an actress. I really wanted to pursue that path, but I didn't have the self-confidence and the resilience to hold myself in the uncertainty of that. So I basically gave up on my dream, found myself building a studio at home 15 years later, funnily enough. But it's really important that we learn to cultivate both of those energetics. And I think part of the problem with this current conversation around the soft femme is that it's kind of denying the importance of the masculine in each of us. And as I said, as a leader, this is something that I've really learned to cultivate over the last decade especially. And I'm glad that I have that actually. So I started out art school, studied creative writing. I then went to work at Groupon when I finished university. It's the fastest growing company of all time. It was a bit of a skewed introduction to corporate life, as Office had about 30, I think I was about the 35th employee when I moved into this huge office in Sydney, and within a few months there were like 200 people there. And I just thought, oh, this is what it must be like in the corporate world. It was a very unique experience, but it really got me hooked on the adrenaline of high growth business. I then moved from Sydney to Byron Bay, where I started working at Tripadil when it was a tiny startup. There was just 2 employees and the founders there. And over the next 3 years, the business grew in size from $2 million to $20 million to $80 million in revenue. I was operations manager through much of that growth. We grew from 2 staff to about 80 staff, many of whom I hired personally. By the end of my time there, I was on the C-level executive team. I was the only woman. All my peers were men, real alpha males, like 15 to 20 years older than me. So it was an extraordinary journey, and I'll share more about what I learned through that on another episode. But for now, let's say that it really gave me this very unique perspective on taking leaps of faith and stepping into the unknown and feeling yourself and your team stretch to create this new reality. I really learned a lot from that experience. I've then worked with a number of other founders over the last 10 years, really in these very close partnership roles. There's a wonderful book called Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman, which talks about the 2 types of leadership required for high growth businesses, and it's the visionary and the integrator. And from that perspective, for a long time, I've really identified as an integrator. If the visionary is the leader who holds the big blue sky picture, who has this incredible vision, usually very charismatic, can kind of carry people along for the ride. The integrator is the one who translates that vision into reality, boots on the ground, operationalizes the vision, project plans, project managers, coordinates the team, and really gets things done. And that has been the role that I have played with successive really wonderful businesses since then. Most recently, I have spent 2 years working alongside the wonderful Jessica Maguire at Nervous System School, which was such an incredible experience. I had the privilege of co-facilitating our programs, our webinars, and other live events, and really was very immersed in that neuroscience around the brain-body connection, and had an opportunity to step more into this role of being in front of a camera rather than in front of a spreadsheet, which, to be honest, is where I've always been happier. So yeah, I've had a wonderful journey career-wise that has informed my perspective on feminine leadership, and I'm sharing my experience today to get to know you all a little bit better, to allow you to get to know me, and to let you know how this has informed my take on feminine leadership. On a personal level, I have 2 children. They're both quite young, and I have been for the last 3 years mid-divorce, and also that experience has really shaped me. We talk about leaps of faith. I think marriage is a big one, and stepping into the void of divorce has tested me in ways that I wouldn't have imagined possible. And if I look back at what I have held in the last 3 years, I'm really grateful that I have a strong inner masculine, because I've been able to hold myself through a period of incredible turbulence. And I arrived at this point earlier this year where the bricks were just stacked up so high personally that I really had to listen to my body saying, we need to stop for a while. Like, we need to be soft. We need to take a break. We need to get offline and into nature. We need to get out of our head and into our body, like a very pull back to the feminine kind of mode of being. And it didn't even really feel like a decision, to be honest. It was just such a strong message from my body that this is what needs to happen now. So this is my recent experience of stepping into the void. And I stepped into that void not really knowing at all what was on the other side, but trusting this quiet, still voice inside that we all have actually, and it's something that we can learn to cultivate, the ability to listen to that still, small, quiet voice inside. And it's exciting when we do, because when we create this space and we step into this darkness, almost like we're standing in the cosmos, suspended between two different planets, and we've closed that door, but this door hasn't yet opened yet. We've taken that leap. When we do that, when we can hold ourselves in that and listen to this still voice inside, often what will come through is what is truest for us. And we have this beautiful opportunity to take a step towards a life that is in alignment with our brightest potential, with our Dharma, if you like. It feels really scary, and often life is operating at this very, to lean on the nervous system terminology, like this very sympathetic nervous system pace where we go, 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 don't stop, don't look down, don't look around, just keep going until you drop dead, basically, is how our system is wired, it often feels. But if we can stop, if we have the luxury to stop as well, and we can create that space, often what's coming through is something that's bigger and truer for us. Part of the journey for me as well, alongside this corporate experience, as I mentioned, has been the study of Tantra. And certainly when I was in high-powered corporate leadership roles, working mostly alongside men as my peers, with that very alpha male kind of culture, my femininity felt almost like something I needed to be embarrassed of, right? Like something that didn't belong there, because the power was masculine and it was about logic and decisiveness and competitiveness. And it didn't feel like there was a space for my feminine softness and sensitivity and my sensuality, which is not to say that we're rocking around our workplaces flaunting our sexuality. But if you're disconnected from your womb space, from your sexual energy, from your desire, from your pleasure, if you're disconnected from that, then you're not fully empowered as a woman. Like, you just aren't. And I don't think we talk about this enough. And again, this has been part of this still small voice inside for me, that we need to talk about this. And I want to talk about this. And it feels really scary to step into this kind of corporate arena and be talking about Tantra and sexuality. And Tantra is not all about sex either, by the way. That's a big misconception that I'd like to myth bust further on another episode. But as female leaders, it's part of the puzzle of who we are, especially when we start talking about embodiment. I think the nervous system work is really, really important, and absolutely recommend you go and check out Jessica Maguire's work at Repairing the Nervous System if you haven't already. She's such a font of knowledge on this topic and has amazing programs that can guide you through it for yourself, and if you're a leader or a health professional or a teacher, to learn how to use this with your clients as well. Very in-depth, rigorous scientific knowledge. That's really important when it comes to embodiment. But we also need to get connected to our sensuality. And this has felt like part of my Dharma, if you like, is to bring this forward. So I'm going to be talking about it on this podcast. And that in itself feels like a leap of faith, because it feels risky. It would be much less risky for me not to talk about that. But I think that it's really important. And if we want to step into this space where we are unapologetically all of it as leaders, then this needs to be part of the conversation. So that's certainly something that's come through for me. And if we look at the chakras, the second chakra, the sacral center, has to do with sexuality, and it also has to do with creativity. So this is where the womb space sits. This is a feminine energy center. The element is water. It's very flowy. And the corporate world and kind of girl boss feminism really teaches us to cut off from that. It's like power ahead, go, 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 batten down the hatches, disconnect from your emotions, just be a boss. And I think we do ourselves a real disservice when we disconnect from this space, because not only does it connect us to our sexuality, to our feminine bodies, but also to our creativity, which in leadership is so important. So I also want to talk about what I have witnessed in entrepreneurs that I've worked with around this topic of taking leaps of faith. I have been so privileged to have a ringside seat several times over, watching really incredible entrepreneurs take leaps of faith, step into the unknown, take massive risks, holding on to that vision. And really, vision is so important here, because that's what I've witnessed, certainly in entrepreneurship, is being able to hold that vision for yourself, but also for your team. If you can't do that, then it's very hard to convince anybody to come with you or why they should get involved in this harebrained scheme. I've witnessed more than one entrepreneur remortgage their home in order to fund a vision that perhaps from the outside looked a little bit out there and a little bit crazy and certainly very risky. And I've seen those risks pay off exponentially. So I feel really privileged to have been immersed in this world where people do take leaps of faith. And so if the biggest strength that you can have as an entrepreneur taking a leap of faith is that absolute unwavering belief in your vision, the greatest enemy then is self-doubt and allowing those little voices of fear to creep in. It takes us from being in a space of expansive belief to being in a state of contraction and stuckness. And there's lots of different ways to approach this. If you're looking at taking a leap of faith, stepping into a void, stepping into the unknown, creating a big change in your life, and there's fear, which of course there will be, from a nervous system perspective, we can learn to cultivate our ability to tolerate stress and to get more in tune with the nervous system so that we can support ourselves through that change. From a tantric perspective, as I've mentioned, we can learn to cultivate a stronger masculine in order to hold the feminine that wants to explore and express. And there's other energetic practices that we can do as well in staying aligned with our truth and with our highest truth and choosing love over fear and all those kinds of things. All of these practices are really important, but also taking the aligned action towards those goals is equally as important as this kind of visioning and manifestation work. So there's a couple of mythological archetypes I want to touch on around this theme of stepping into the unknown, taking a risk, taking a leap of faith. The first is one that's quite well known, and it's the story of Icarus. Now, just to give you the backstory, there was a war going on between two kings, Minos and Theseus, and Minos had imprisoned Theseus in the labyrinth underground, and Theseus escaped. And Minos was very angry, and he blamed the master craftsman who built the labyrinth, whose name was Daedalus, and he thought that Daedalus must have told his prisoner how to escape. So he imprisoned Daedalus and his son Icarus in a tower by the sea. And Daedalus, in his crafty expertise, managed to fashion 2 pairs of wings from material and blankets and beeswax and sticks that were lying around the castle. And he gave a pair to his son Icarus, and he gave a pair to himself in order that they could escape this tower. And he gave Icarus a 2-part warning before he put the wings on. And this is important because we have come to view the Icarus story as a tale about not flying too close to the sun, right? It's a cautionary tale about hubris. And Daedalus did warn Icarus against this. Don't fly too close to the sun or the beeswax will melt. He also warned him against complacency. Make sure you don't fly too close to the ocean either. Don't fly too low, or the moisture from the water will destroy your wings and you'll drown. I think this is really interesting that in a very patriarchal culture, which kind of pushes forward the male experience, and particularly a juvenile masculine kind of approach of domination and control. We'll unpack all this in another episode. But certainly for the juvenile masculine archetype, if you like, who's very driven by ego and wanting to amass power and to exert his strength and his will. I have a 6-year-old boy and certainly can see the merits of this tale. For this juvenile masculine archetype, a cautionary tale about hubris and making sure that you don't fly too close to the sun is highly relevant. For the mature feminine archetype, the mother, if you like, who, whether or not you have children, when you're in this phase of life where you're spinning all the plates and you're holding a lot of responsibility, you're the vessel, right? I don't think many women need to be cautioned against flying too close to the sun. I think more women need to be cautioned against the risk of never unfolding their wings at all and never really seeing what they're capable of, because we put everyone else first. We've internalized this message: don't fly too close to the sun, don't get too big for your boots, don't have tickets on yourself, don't put yourself out there, be quiet, be small, be still. I think it's time we bust this all open, and I'm interested in the ways that stories like the Icarus myth kind of infiltrate through our culture and are running in the background. Even if we're not aware of it, we've all heard that story. We all know the moral of the story: don't fly too close to the sun. But it's not relevant for us, for most of us. And so I wanted to share, so if Icarus is a story warning us against taking risks, I want to share another story which reveals the power and the beauty that can happen and the transformation that can happen when we say goodbye to the known and we step into the darkness and the fear and the uncertainty of the unknown. Because it's scary. Like, let's be real. Taking a leap of faith and closing the door on what's familiar and known, whatever that means for you in whatever aspect of life, and stepping into this space of uncertainty where the new is unformed, right? We don't know exactly what we're stepping towards. We're just trusting this little voice inside saying, there's something in this direction, I need to pull on this thread. It's really uncomfortable and it's really scary, and we're sort of in the darkness, like in this void. So I wanted to share this other story of a female archetype called Cedna. And Cedna is on a boat with her father and he pushes her overboard. And she's clinging on for dear life with her fingers because she doesn't want to let go. She doesn't want to let go of the known. She doesn't want to let go of the familiar. She wants to hold on. And her father cuts off her 10 fingers with a knife. And she tumbles into the sea and she falls to the bottom of the ocean. And she's there in the darkness, in this transformative vortex, if you like. I think there's so much potency in these images of like the floor of the ocean or the outer limits of the universe. And she's in the darkness, and then after some time she emerges, no longer the girl that she was on the boat, but she is now a powerful goddess. This is what transpires when she steps into that void and isn't sure what's next and wants to hold on to the known, but has the fortitude to withstand that period of being in this crucible. And I think this is such a more resonant story for women when we've spent a lifetime playing small, not listening to our inner wisdom and suppressing our voice. So I wanted to leave you with that story today. Rather than this cautionary tale of don't fly too close to the sun, I wonder what would happen if you actually let yourself tumble into this void and to explore the unknown and to listen to that still, quiet voice inside that carries so much wisdom. I'm going to leave it there for today. If you want to journey more deeply with me into some of these themes, I have a free 3-part training series, which is really designed for women who lead or who want to lead. And it's called the De-Armored Leader. And it walks us through some of the most potent learnings that I have explored over the course of my career and my study. And we look at polarity, which we've touched on a bit today, and that inner marriage of masculine and feminine. We look at embodiment and why it's so important, especially for women. And we also look at vulnerability, which is really a superpower as a leader, and it's something that you can learn to cultivate. And the next podcast episode will be all about that, so stay tuned. And if you want to access that free 3-part training series, there's extra videos and worksheets for you to move through on this theme of the de-armored leader. And it's the type of leadership that I see we really need in our world moving forward. You can go to madelineeliza.com/leader and you can access all of the resources from there. I'd love to hear your feedback as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate and review the show, share it with your friends. Really loved having you along for the ride, and we'll see you next time.